An internet challenge that's making the rounds on social media sites is linked to teens committing suicide.
Remember the rush that you felt as a kid when you and your friends gathered around a bathroom mirror, turned off the lights, and whispered Bloody Mary 3 times? It was exciting, terrifying, and maybe even kind of silly. But that silly thrill came from something deeper, something you didn't even realize you were tapping into. What if this wasn't just a harmless childhood dare? What if Bloody Mary, Charlie, and other classic playground games came with a much darker history than we were ever told? Today, we're crawling into the deepest parts of disturbing childhood games. Let's start at the top of the iceberg. Bloody Mary is a perfect example. It's practically a rite of passage. Everyone remembers to say her name while staring at your own reflection. Most people think that the legend is just based on an imageless ghost who might appear in the mirror and scratch your face. But the real history behind Bloody Mary connects it to something more chilling. The legend has roots tangled in trickles of history. Queen Mary I of England, often called Bloody Mary for her persecution of non-Catholics, is one of the most credited sources. Queen Mary's reign during the 16th century was famous for her ruthless executions, and some believe her restless spirit came to inhabit the mirror itself. But others trace the game back to older folklore from European villages, where mirrors were thought to act as portals to the spirit world. People covered them during funerals so the dead couldn't pull someone living into the other side. So, standing in front of a mirror, summoning something dead, that was never a random coincidence. And here's where it gets messy. Players of Bloody Mary have gone beyond seeing something and landed in stories of real harm, even injuries. One of the most bizarre cases comes from Indiana in the 1970s. 3 girls reportedly played the game during a sleepover, and according to their parents, one stabbed her reflection, but when they turned the lights back on, the mirror was cracked and the girl's arm was bleeding as if it had been cut by the glass. Did it happen because she panicked, or was it because something else was there with her? Then there's Charlie, which exploded across social media in 2015. It seemed like just another schoolyard game like a Ouija board's cousin. Kids balanced pencils at cross angles on a piece of paper marked with yes and no, and then asked Charlie, a supposed ghost, simple yes or no questions. But here's the thing. Charlie isn't just a meaningless trend. It's said to have roots in a Mexican ritual for summoning spirits and communicating with the dead. This game doesn't come with the same ancient, specific folklore as some others. It's darker, almost anonymous in its superstition. That might make it easier to dismiss, but if you've ever played it, you know this. When that top pencil moves even slightly, it feels real. On social media, videos flooded in, shaky voices, blurry footage, and lots of screaming. But not all encounters ended in playful laughter. There's a chilling story from Peru where a group of teens claimed to have contacted something evil during Charlie. One girl became so terrified during the session, she supposedly passed out. An ambulance was called, and though she recovered physically, her family reported that she refused to be alone afterward. Is it just fear? Or is there something about these seemingly innocent games that leaves traces behind? So, why do we even play games like this? Turns out, there's a psychological explanation that might shed light on what's really happening. All of it tied to something called the ideomotor effect. Essentially, it's a subconscious muscular movement that makes it feel like objects, like the pencil and Charlie, are moving on their own. The same effect explains why Ouija boards seem to work despite players swearing they're not pushing anything. But just because something can be explained doesn't mean it's all in your head. A simple Google search is full of accounts swearing these games go too far. Maybe sometimes our fear does tap into something that shouldn't be disturbed. Dead Man, Come Alive likely emerged from playground elimination traditions and European campfire folklore, where death was used to heighten fear or demonstrate courage. In modern play, one child lies motionless or dead, while peers chant, dead man, come alive at the count of 5 before the dead child jumps up blindfolded and tries to tag others. Though usually harmless, there's a documented incident from a 2017 folklore study. Children playing this on a trampoline were startled by a passing car's screeching tires and worried they had accidentally launched someone into real danger. That disconnect between performance and reality makes it unsettling, especially when panic or real-world triggers get pulled into the ritual. And that's why these childhood urban legends stick with us, right? They become campfire stories we repeat long after we've grown. But they also scratch at the darker curiosity inside all of us. Because what if the fear runs deeper than we're ready to admit? Now, let's dive beneath the surface into a darker layer of childhood games, where the playful games you grew up with merge into something more sinister. These aren't just stories to tease friends, they're strange invitations to step into danger. Let's start with the Midnight Game. If you thought Bloody Mary gave you a rush, this one takes the fear and draws it out for hours. The Midnight Game most likely stems from old pagan rituals, though these specifics are murky. Some say it was once used as a punishment for disobedience, while others argue it was simply a fear-inducing cautionary tale. All we know for sure is that the ritual keeps resurfacing, especially on creepypasta forums and Reddit threads, gaining traction among people curious about what might happen when you face something unseen. The rules are straightforward yet chilling. In the safety of a darkened house, you're required to write your name on a piece of paper, prick your finger for a drop of blood, and let it soak into the writing. You then place the paper in front of a wooden door, light a candle, and knock exactly 22 times. That precision alone is enough to make the uninitiated pause. On the final knock, right as the clock strikes midnight, you open the door and welcome the Midnight Man, who's now free to roam. But the game doesn't end there. Your goal from that point on is simple: avoid being caught. The Midnight Man is said to be a malevolent entity, not a figment of your imagination, but something real, tangible, and opportunistic. Players report that his presence is unmistakable, marked by sudden cold spots, the sensation of being watched, or faint whispers in the distance. If your candle flickers and dies, which is a sign that he's close, you have 10 seconds to relight it. Fail to do so, and the only protection is a circle of salt. Players describe this as the moment their muscles lock, their hearts hammering as they scramble to draw the ring. Even with the circle, the entity doesn't leave you alone. It's said the Midnight Man taunts you with vivid hallucinations of your greatest fears, sometimes making you question whether the salt will even hold. Stories from people who tried the game paint a vivid picture of near-paralyzing terror. Some say that they've even seen his shadow in the corners, a pitch-black silhouette that doesn't match anything else in the room. The consequence for playing? That's where the lore takes its darkest turn. Failing to evade the Midnight Man until 3:33 a.m., the precise moment the game ends, supposedly results in brutal punishment. According to legend, he doesn't just torment you psychologically, he manifests fear in the most brutal ways possible, the gruesome removal of organs. And while this does sound impossible for many to believe, descriptions of the Midnight Man differ just enough from their source threads to feel personal, almost tailored to the player. Moving next to something less known, the Dry Bones feels like the cousin to Hide and Seek and Midnight Mirror dares, but with a curse that clings long after the candles burn out. Its origins are murky, rooted in modern creepypasta and Reddit horror threads circa 2013, where it was shared as a sinister ritual meant to summon a demon-like entity you must evade until dawn. The rules are as rigid as they are unnerving. Precisely at 12:01 a.m., lock every door and window, turn off all lights and electronics, then stand before a bathroom mirror in absolute silence. Strike a match, let it burn for 15 seconds, and whisper the invocation. I welcome you in, come. Extinguish it, slip away, and begin a terrifying game of hide and seek with something unseen, hiding until 3 a.m. If you win, legend says your wish arrives at dawn. If not, well, that depends on the version you read. One of the most harrowing accounts comes from a Reddit user who described preparing to play it alone with a friend in their family home. They'd only just begun reading the ritual aloud before hearing distant childlike music, a wind-up music box, followed by scratching at the window. One voice whispered, "Come join the party." And then another, colder one, "Come out, I want to play." Frozen with fear, the user sprinted and locked themselves inside the bathroom, remaining there until the first light of morning, too frightened to move. Another person reported clicking through the rules online and then waking at midnight to groaning and tapping at their vanity mirror and seeing a pale face pressed against the glass so vivid it left them sleeping downstairs for nights afterward. Though there is no corroborated proof, no police reports, no medical records, the psychological weight of these stories reveals the ritual's real power. Silence in a dark house, with the knowledge you're playing with something unknown, leaves your mind primed to hear, see, and smell what may not be there, but feels horrifyingly real. And whether it's mind games, sleep paralysis, or genuinely something beyond comprehension, Dry Bones has claimed more fears than shadows, leaving survivors battered by anxiety and sleepless nights far more than by any physical harm. Though slightly less infamous, the Closet Games comes with its own set of unsettling rules and consequences. This one has a more ambitious origin. No clear ties to history, just a set of instructions repeated on forums for those curious or careless enough to try. You stand in a completely dark closet while holding a lit match. Once inside, you chant a specific phrase, "Show me the light or leave me in darkness." The match is your only safety, your token of control. But here's the scary part. If you fail to light it in time or it extinguishes before you finish the ritual, you're said to summon a malevolent presence. Some claim you open a doorway to darkness itself, and once you leave the closet, you might notice something strange. Your house never feels quite the same again. Hallways appear slightly longer. People insist that there's a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at them from the closet if they dare to peek inside again. Like the Midnight Game, stories about the Closet Game are scattered across forums and threads. A user once recounted how she tried it during a high school sleepover with skeptical friends, only to throw open the door screaming less than a minute after starting. She claimed she felt something grab her wrist, something that wasn't one of her friends playing a prank. Reports like these are either met with belief by those who played, but there's one thing you start to notice in every retelling. People who've tried these rituals often refuse to explain why they're so drawn in. The invitation, it seems, is powerful enough. Another Reddit-born creepypasta ritual first posted in 2012 by user FableForge, Three Kings, quickly spread into multiple forums. Players must gather 2 large mirrors, 3 chairs, a candle, a fan behind a throne chair, an alarm, bucket of water, childhood item, and a trusted partner. At exactly 3:30 a.m., the player sits in the throne between the mirrors, asking questions and waiting until 4:34 for rescue. Users report peripheral visions of marching shadows, whispering, and even sensing deep subconscious thoughts. Still, these are only rituals. They lean into performance and ambiguity to create their fear. You might walk away shaken, but there's comfort in the idea that it's all just theater. Or is there? As much as they blur the boundary between folk and imagination, you can still write them off as superstition if you need to sleep at night. But that's not the case for the games deeper in the iceberg. If you're enjoying the video so far and want to see more content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel and allows me to keep making videos for you. Alright, let's get back to it. Unlike whispering into closets or knocking on doors at midnight, the consequences of these next games aren't whispered in forums or debated on threads. They're real, and they've left a trail that you can't argue with. In many cultures, games aren't just seen as entertainment. They hold a more serious weight. Some come with rules so specific that even a small mistake is believed to carry real consequences, but not in the way we'd think of in a normal game, like losing points or being disqualified. The consequences here are darker, potentially dangerous, and threatening. In Japan and Korea, two games stand out: the bath game or Dharma-san and the elevator game. Let's start with the bath game. Known as Dharma-san, it involves summoning a ghost, to be specific. To play this game, you need a bathroom with a bathtub. The ritual begins at night. You fill the tub with water, turn off the lights, and sit in the tub facing away from the faucet. Then comes the creepiest part. With your eyes closed, you wash your hair while chanting, "Dharma-san fell down." The idea is that while you're doing this, a spirit, a ghostly figure with one eye, appears behind you. But the instructions warn never to open your eyes or look back no matter what you feel. After finishing, you get out of the tub, but you're not done yet. That spirit, the one you summoned, is now following you. Throughout the next day, players claim you'll sense her near you. Some say they see her shadow in the corner of their vision. Others describe feeling like someone is watching or following them from a distance. The only way to end the game is to catch a glimpse of her and shout, "Kita!" while swinging your arm in a chopping motion, symbolically cutting her loose. If you fail to do so by midnight, though, you open the door for her to haunt you, potentially even harming you in your dreams. At its core, it's a sort of twisted game of tag, but the stakes are much higher. This isn't just a childhood test of bravery. It's something with deeper roots in Japanese culture, where spirits and lingering energy are taken very seriously. Then, there's the elevator game, possibly even more infamous. This ritual, with origins traced back to Japan and South Korea, doesn't involve summoning a spirit. It's said to take you somewhere entirely otherworldly. To play, you need access to a building with at least 10 floors. You enter the elevator alone and follow a specific sequence of button presses, ride to the 4th floor, then to the 2nd, back to the 6th, up to the 10th, and finally, return to the 5th. If done correctly, a young woman may enter the elevator on the 5th floor. This is where the warnings come in. You're told not to speak to or even look at her. Instead, push the button for the 1st floor. If the elevator descends, the game is over. But if it goes up to the 10th floor instead, you've succeeded. You've entered what's called the other world. What's in the other world? Accounts circulating online describe it as eerily similar to our own, but subtly wrong. The floors are said to be bathed in a dim red light. No one else is present. Your phone or electronics won't work. Some players claim that the sensation of being there is suffocating, like the air itself feels different. The instructions warn against exploring too far, though losing track of the elevator could mean you'll never return. And when it comes to leaving, you must re-enter the elevator and press the buttons in reverse order. Any deviation, or worse, any interaction with that mysterious woman supposedly traps you in the other world forever. Of all the elevator game stories, none has fueled its popularity more than the case of Elisa Lam. In 2013, Elisa was staying at LA's Cecil Hotel, now called Stay on Main, when she mysteriously disappeared. Days later, her body was discovered in the hotel's rooftop water tank. What drew even more attention was the strange behavior she exhibited in the hotel's elevator, caught on CCTV footage shortly before her death. In the footage, she appears disoriented, even paranoid. At one point, she exits the elevator, looking around as if searching for someone, and then stepping back in and repeatedly pressing buttons without any apparent plan. Internet was obsessed over the video, and many pointed to the elevator game as an explanation. They theorized that Lam might have been trying to follow the game's sequence, becoming stuck between the real world and the other world in the process. Of course, no definitive evidence ties Lam's death to the elevator game. Much of the speculation ignores that the Cecil Hotel already had a grim reputation, a history loaded with suicides, murders, and alleged hauntings that make it a magnet for dark theories. Additionally, details about Lam's mental health and medication came to light, suggesting her behavior could have had more to do with her personal struggles than anything supernatural. Still, the case remains a haunting reminder of how real-life tragedy can become entangled with urban legends. Now, let's jump into the rituals game, the Raven Man. It feels like it pulls straight out of a nightmare, designed to be played in the real world or as much as anyone would dare. This one has no clear starting point and no solid evidence of who created it, but the instructions for summoning the Raven Man have circulated enough times online that the ritual has taken the form of legend. You need a dark room, candles, salt, and something sharp. Alone or with a group, you're instructed to recite an incantation while burning a piece of cloth or paper. The ritual often requires blood, either your own or someone else's if done as part of a group. And it's said that if you perform the steps just right, the Raven Man will appear. So, who or what is the Raven Man? Accounts differ, but most say he's not quite human. Descriptions depict a tall, shadowy figure with piercing bird-like features or glowing red eyes. His arrival marks the beginning of a dangerous and highly specific interaction. Depending on the version of the ritual, he might be there to answer your questions, fulfill your requests, or deliver something in exchange for your offering. But there are always rules. Looking directly at him, speaking first, or failing to extinguish your candles properly are all noted as massive mistakes. People claim failure leads to dark consequences, and some versions tell of participants vanishing completely, while others speak of bad luck or even death following those who disrespected the Raven Man. There's a second version of the game that requires 3 participants. In this, the roles are split to an offering, an incanter, and a witness. This version is a little sexist. The rules say that only a virgin girl can play the role of offering, while the incanter must be a male. The offering provides their blood, and the incanter performs the ritual, summoning the Raven Man. But only the incanter is permitted to open their eyes once he appears. If the offering fails to relight their flame mid-ritual, the consequences reportedly extend to everyone in the room. It usually starts with hallucinations, black feathers appearing in places they shouldn't be, or fleeting glimpses of a tall figure with a beak-like face. Within days, things escalate to lights flickering on their own, cold spots following them around their home, and hearing raven claws in dead silence. Then comes the sickness. Participants report falling violently ill, doctors unable to explain why. In some of the darkest retellings, the illness becomes fatal, especially for the offering. Whether it's guilt, suggestion, or something far worse, the second version of the Raven Man ritual is said to leave something behind, and once it's followed you home, it doesn't always leave. Some stories online claim the Raven Man isn't just a game, but a kind of invocation tied to lost souls. Words like ill omen crop up again and again, with some accounts blaming disappearances or tragic accidents on rituals that never closed properly. One chilling connection is the rumor that missing persons cases, including those of teenagers, have originated near areas where the Raven Man is most whispered about. These theories are, of course, impossible to track down or verify. The Raven Man lives in the shadowy space between folk and fear, just like our next game. The Kuklaban ritual begins with the seemingly whimsical matryoshka or Russian nesting dolls transformed into unstable, ominous vessels. While the dolls have been part of Russian heritage since the late 19th century, this particular variant surfaced on obscure internet forums in the early 2000s as magic games for daring teens. According to the instructions, you need a family heirloom doll set, supposedly full of older energy, sprinkled with rice or strands of red threads inside the hollow sections, lit candles surrounding them in dim candlelight, mirrors to reflect their image, and a salt circle to anchor the ritual. You unlock each doll in sequence, whispering your deepest wish into the air. The rule is to stop one doll short of the final one, then burn the shell of the second to the last doll and hide the smallest under your pillow when the candles go out. Supposedly, if obeyed perfectly, your wish will come true. But breaking any minor rule, like miscounting or extinguishing a candle too soon, invites restless energy instead. That's where the folklore takes hold. One chilling case involves a 12-year-old girl who performed the ritual at summer camp, awaiting the dawn alone in a cabin. Her friends reported she seemed entranced as she arranged candles around the dolls, whispering over and over, "Open the child. Hear the voice." The next morning, she awoke to all the candles burnt to stubs and the second smallest doll pried apart in the middle of the floor, rice scattered like spilled entrails, even though she had carefully sealed it the night before. She insisted she hadn't touched it. Her doll remained silent afterward, but she couldn't sleep without a nightlight for weeks. Online communities echo similar accounts. Dolls with whispering voices at midnight, weird cold drafts, candles relighting themselves amid untouched surroundings. These shared stories leave a pattern. Once someone crosses the line from child's play to ritual, something shifts in the room's energy, and it never entirely goes back to how it was. The hidden depth haunts the ritual. What starts as a harmless game becomes a reckless trade with forces that don't respect the rules of innocence. What both Kuklaban and the Raven Man have in common is the way they play on the power and allure of the forbidden. Each ritual tempts players into stepping beyond boundaries that feel off limits. Engaging with games like these allows participants to taste the thrill of crossing invisible lines, fueled by curiosity that's intensified precisely because it's taboo. Psychological studies show how our minds light up for the impossible forbidden event. Something that seems supernatural or off-limits, sometimes even more than ordinary mysteries. So, why do people still play? Like many of the games we've talked about so far, it's partly curiosity and partly the thrill. But with these games, there's something connected to forces tied to specific histories and traditions. Players admit these games feel heavier, more immersive, more personal. You're not just playing against your own fears, you're playing against an unseen opponent rooted in legend. And still, these are just ritual frameworks people follow to tap into something unexplained. They can haunt you psychologically, but they don't cause real physical harm, or so we tell ourselves. The games that come next, though, they've proven to go beyond ritual and imagination. The harm they've caused isn't whispered about in passing or shared as hypothetical risks online. It's real, tangible, and in many cases, deadly. Some cultural ritual games leave you shaken, but others, they leave a trail of undeniable consequences that no one sees coming until it's too late. You've seen unsettling games before, but now we dive into the realm where light fades entirely and only the faint pulse of forbidden curiosity guides you deeper. And we kick things off with Sad Satan, first surfaced in 2015, introduced by a YouTube channel called Obscure Horror Corner. The channel's creator, someone known only as Jamie, claimed to have downloaded the game through a tip on a Tor hidden service, essentially the dark web. The mystery began right there. Where it came from, who created it, even why it existed was already tangled. With the game itself, that's where things crossed into nightmare territory. Sad Satan drops players into a first-person view, trudging slowly through dimly lit corridors with no clear end or purpose. It doesn't function like a traditional game. There are no puzzles to solve, no enemies to fight. In fact, there's hardly anything to do except wander forward. And yet, even those few steps through its world seem unbearable. The visuals are stark, grim, and blurry, with a black and white aesthetic that feels stripped of all comfort. The audio makes it even worse, with distorted tracks, occasional loud bursts of static, and eerie clips of reverse speech that send shivers through your spine. It's as though the game is trying to push you away from continuing while simultaneously daring you to uncover what's hidden deeper. Players of Sad Satan have noted how the game uses moments of interruption to jar you out of even what little rhythm it has. Flashes of disturbing full-screen images appear when you least expect them, ranging from unsettling abstract visuals to real-world horrors. In its original repetition, Sad Satan's content hinted at heavy and deeply disturbing themes. Some images seemed tied to Operation U-Tree, a high-profile investigation into child abuse allegations against public figures in the UK. Faces of notorious figures like Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris appear out of nowhere, adding an unsettling air of real-world evil to an otherwise surrealistic experience. Then there's the audio interviews with the likes of Charles Manson, paired with reversed or warped tracks that make every moment in the game feel as though something is deliberately trying to unnerve you, even when nothing visible is happening. But even worse than the original game is what came after. Following Jamie's release of Sad Satan, a supposed clone version of the game appeared online. That version cranked every horrifying aspect up to 10 and then some, while the original was wrapped in unnerving atmosphere and sporadic flashes of disturbing imagery. The clone jumped right into outright gore and depravity. Graphic images of mutilation and horrifying violence appeared throughout, and some claim the earliest builds incorporated depictions of child pornography into the game files. It became the embodiment of internet horror, the kind of trap that helps define why the dark web is as feared as it is. But that's the thing. The clone, for all its grotesque shock value, seemed to cross the line into exploitation, which only deepened the paranoia about what games like this truly stand for. Sad Satan as an experience became inseparable from the haunting realization that sometimes it's not the game itself, it's the people behind it who make the horror real. Yet despite endless speculation, even the narrative behind Sad Satan remains fractured. Jamie admitted later he provided a wrong link when describing how he came across the game, further complicating the legitimacy of its origins. Was Obscure Horror Corner a victim of the game's twisted intentions, or did the channel's creator intentionally set a hoax in motion that took a life of its own? The truth may never be fully revealed, and that's a constant when it comes to these nebulous internet experiences. They seem to thrive in uncertainty. Sad Satan doesn't give any answers. It only leaves more questions, worming its way into players' minds and making them wonder whether the game was merely trying to scare them or trying to communicate something far darker. What if a game wasn't just dangerous, but deadly? That's the chilling reality behind something called the infamous Blue Whale Challenge, a so-called game that emerged online and left an unsettling trail of tragedy in its wake. Unlike the urban legends or whispered rituals we've heard about, and even our own childhood games that we don't exactly know the origins of, this isn't a game that toys with the supernatural or dares you to test your fear. This one reaches into real lives and exploits one of the most vulnerable groups, teenagers. It's a game where one wrong step doesn't end with a scare or a laugh. It can end with death. And the most terrifying thing? It's spread under the noses of adults, amplified by social media, and thrived in the darkest corners of the internet. The Blue Whale Challenge first came to light around 2016 in Russia, but reports suggest it had actually begun a few years earlier. It's not clear who invented it or exactly where it started. Some say in private online groups. Others claim it was part of a disturbing subculture in Russia's social media ecosystem. What we do know is how it worked. The challenge involves a curator, typically a stranger who connects with a participant online and guides them through a series of 50 tasks over 50 days. The tasks start out seemingly harmless. Watch a scary movie, wake up at odd hours, but quickly these escalate into self-harm, isolation, and eventually, in the final task, suicide. To make matters worse, these curators prey on people who are already vulnerable, teenagers, especially those seeking validation or those seeking an escape from difficult lives, become perfect targets. Curators don't just hand out instructions, they manipulate participants, pushing them over emotional and psychological edges, playing on fears and insecurities. Suddenly, it doesn't feel like a choice anymore. It feels like the only way to escape is to finish the game. That's how real the threat becomes. There's one name that often comes up when people discuss the Blue Whale Challenge: Rina Palenkova. Her story is as entwined with the mystery of the game. In 2015, Rina, a 17-year-old from Russia, posted a photo to her social media account, a selfie where she's wearing a scarf, standing outside in the snow, with a haunting caption, "Yeah, bye." The very next day, she took her own life. The image quickly became an eerie symbol in online spaces where teenagers were discussing depression and suicide. Some say this post was one of the sparks that lit the fire of the Blue Whale Challenge. It wasn't that Rina herself created it. There was no evidence she was involved, but her death became a point of fixation, almost romanticized in these circles. Forums dedicated to the challenge began using her face and final words, turning her tragedy into something even darker. Officials later began investigating these clusters of suicides among teens in Russia, which seemed connected, at least in narrative, to the Blue Whale Challenge. The numbers were staggering. Some claimed that hundreds of children had taken their lives because of this game. Journalists and law enforcement could never fully confirm these links. The lines between fact and fiction blurred, but the pattern was undeniable. Stories started surfacing of teens who had been found with drawings of whales etched into their skin or phone records showing they had visited dark forums at night. In one case, a 15-year-old boy in Siberia jumped to his death from a high-rise building. His friends later claimed he had been participating in the challenge. But is Blue Whale really a game? Or is it something that spiraled out of other influences? Things like the high suicide rates among teens in Russia or the psychology of online communities. Investigative journalist Evgeny Berg dug into it and suggested something chillingly mundane. The game itself might not have even existed quite the way people thought. The reality was, Russia's youth had fallen into anonymous online forums filled with surreal, meme-like content, often centered on death, suicide, and nihilism. Within these underground communities, the challenge began to take shape less like a structured game and more like a viral narrative. But once that narrative gained traction, it created a feedback loop. Suddenly, the idea of the Blue Whale Challenge felt like a real thing, a blueprint for tragedy wrapped in a kind of self-fulfilling mythos. Still, the fear of blue whales spiraled globally. The media, especially outside Russia, latched onto the idea of an invisible scourge targeting children through their phones. By 2017, reports of the challenge popped up in countries like Ukraine, India, and even the United States. Schools began issuing warnings, urging parents to monitor their kids' internet use. In India alone, at least 24 deaths were linked to the challenge. One case involved a young boy who left cryptic posts online days before taking his own life, referencing blue whales. Unlike ghost stories or urban legends, this wasn't about what might happen. This was about what was happening. The lives lost, whether directly tied to the game or indirectly through the ecosystem it created, are now part of its legacy. So what started as a mysterious digital rumor became much more like a caution. Yes, but also proof of how the internet can become a playground for something terrifying. The legend of Polybius occupies the shadow-laden intersection of arcade nostalgia and government paranoia. It's commonly tied to 1981 Portland, Oregon, when, allegedly, 7 dark, unmarked arcade cabinets known as Polybius appeared in local gaming halls. The game's supposedly hypnotic geometry and pulsing colors lured teens into marathon sessions. But it wasn't the gameplay that became infamous, it was the aftermath. Players reportedly suffered crippling migraines, seizures, paralyzing insomnia, sudden bouts of amnesia, nightmarish hallucinations, and in one particularly bleak tale, a teenager died from a seizure mid-game. Rumors spread that monochromatic suits, men in black, periodically serviced the machines, extracted data rather than cash, and tradesmen in vans carted away the cabinets within 6 weeks, leaving behind terrified patrons. The real-world pieces have been documented in 1981. 2 Portland teens fell ill, one from migraines playing Tempest, another from playing Asteroids for nearly 28 hours straight, and local federal agents raided arcades for illegal gambling and drug activity, even installing surveillance gizmos within cabinets. Yet no actual cabinet nor developer like the Phantom Sinislotion Company has ever been verified. Nonetheless, the myth grew. One Portland arcade regular said black cabinets did come and go, but he never heard of anyone blacking out in game-induced fits. That hasn't stopped the conspiracy theories. Some insist that Polybius was a CIA mind control experiment tied to MKUltra. Others claim it was just bad timing, civil liberties, paranoia, and rumors spun out of isolated migraines. Polybius remains a high-score legend built on frayed threads of truth and equal parts fear and fascination. Games like these stand at the deepest point of the iceberg. where no solid answers exist. They do what every frightening tale and ritual before them has strived to do, but take it one step further. They don't just challenge the logic of what you think is real. They practically demand you question the source of your own fear. Why is the game affecting you so much? Is it the content, or the possibility that somewhere within all the confusing layers, there might be a shred of truth? That's the real reason games like this stick. They aren't just played. They continue to play in your mind long after you stop. These games leave us with one final question. Why do we play them at all? Do we need an answer to the unknown? Or are we drawn in because fear itself, in all of its darkness, offers us something we can't quite explain? We think of childhood as a time of innocence, but some of the games we played say otherwise. From whispered dares in the dark to chants we repeated without knowing their meaning, these games weren't just harmless fun. They were rituals to test courage wrapped in play. So, the next time someone says, "It's just a game," ask yourself, where did it come from? And who was the first to play it? Let us know in the comments if you've ever played something you wish you hadn't. And until next time, stay curious, but remember, some games were never meant for kids.